moment to verify that we are on.
Okay.
I'll start recording this component. Okay, we are good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the mix-up. I was on time for once, just in the wrong place, I guess, and that's just the way it goes. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of 2026. We're in the legislative season. For those of you that don't know, we're in the middle of it. It's a budget season. For post-secondary, I'm not sure about the commissioner as much, but post-secondary, we got cut a little bit in the House budget. We are out there doing our best we can to try to get some of those dollars back, simply because, I can't think of anything more important and a return on investment better than education. So that's our story, and we got data to back it up. As a matter of fact, as we think about what we've been doing in student success, and I say this about higher ed all the time, we just can't do it properly without a strong early childhood and a strong P-12 system. It really is how we approach this and how we look at it, the reason why the continuum exists, I guess. As far as in post-secondary, throw a little data out at you. We got our data back. Once again, we're going to be at the top in the country in enrollment gains. It's like 3 or 4 years in a row. We're number one in retention improvement. This is like third, fourth year in a row, number one in persistence, same way. Number two in the country in completions. If any of my folks from Idaho listening, I'm not sure how you guys beat us. Utah or Idaho, one of those, they added 3 more students somehow, they found them. But we're proud of what we've been able to do in that area. We also have seen great dual credit performance, as you well know, not only in those that are attending, but how well they're doing in college once they get to college if they had a dual credit in their background. We've actually had far more of those high demand workforce areas, and that too is important to keep our economy going. Our FAFSA rates are up. But we still have a little ways to go in that area, even though we're nationally competitive. I still believe we could do a lot better job. The other thing I'm proud to report, our latest data are showing, as you all know, for about 10 to 11 years, we've had continuing declining in college going rates in Kentucky. In the last 2 years, that has been stopped and turned around. We're going back up again. And for those that know anything about statistics and population processes, it's kind of hard to stop a slide that has been that steep. It surely is harder to stop it and go in a different direction. And I just want to thank all my P-12 counterparts, people at Kia, Gear Up, a lot of other folks who did a lot of work in making sure that happens along with our campuses. More than anything else, I'm saying all these things just simply because as we increase attainment, we've done a lot of this stuff together, and it's more important that we look at it that way as we move into the future. We have still population groups we're going to have to work harder to make sure that they are a part of this success continuum, and we're going to concentrate on those as much as we can, breaking the laws. But we're going to say that we don't want to leave any student behind, whether they're from Clay County like I am, or inner city Louisville, or Lexington, or any place else. We cannot do that. As we do what we do, this continuum embodies the commitment that we have to Kentucky's economy, is the way that I see it. It embodies it in more ways than one. As we look at policy alignment, as we look at Matt Berry and all you guys, data alignment, as we continue to hopefully get enhanced wage information to go into our processes to even look at it more, as we get more clarity, as we get more opportunity for every student, I think it's important for us to continually review where we're at. How well, yes, we're gonna celebrate when we have successes like we've been having, but we're still gonna have to look at how do we increase these opportunities for students, because there are gaps that still obviously exist. I think we're going to, is Tina Young with us from ESG today, Amanda? Hey,
Yes,
Tina, I'm glad
yes,
to
right
see
on the
you.
screen.
I
Hmm.
thought you were going to be here. We're happy to have you as a partner, and we're happy to have you join in to what we're going to be doing a little bit later. Happy to take any questions you may have. We're getting a little bit late start, so I'll cut down on my entry uh, sort of conversation. I'm going to turn it over to my partner in good crime, Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, I'm not sure about good prime, but I'm trying to be prime. How about that? I'm doing my best. But thank you so much, Dr. Thompson, for the kind introduction. And much like Dr. Thompson and the people at CPE, we've got a lot of great data to share too. As a matter of fact, if you look at our state testing data, it's the best it's been since COVID. And we were looking for those things to continue. Very pleased with that. And also too, very much like we're over trying to make sure we get education funded as much as possible. We are thankful that there has been some additions in the committee sub in House Bill 500 and the budget bill as it stands. We do have an increase in for fiscal year 27 of $40 per student, which is about $20.7 million. But also too, we have a $166 increase in for students in fiscal year 28 per student. The one thing that you probably hear a lot about when it comes to funding deals with, you'll hear the phrase fully fund transportation. And typically, what our legislators have been doing is looking at prior year funding. So we do have the current funding for buses. And before I give you the number, let me give you a little bit of an example. When I started as a superintendent, I think a 72 passenger bus, upper $80,000, maybe low 90s. That same bus right now is about 163,000. In a little over a decade, those costs for a bus, for example, has nearly doubled in some cases. So when you talk about fully funding transportation, where it talks about the T1 codes, things of that nature, right now in the budget you're looking at 300 and almost $99 million when it comes to funding transportation currently, and that's only 81%. If you really and truly going to fully fund it, transportation, and I'm not talking about extracurricular trips. I'm talking about sending kids to and from school, maintaining buses, things of that nature. It's over $492 million. So that's not a small ask by any stretch because, 399, we're appreciative of that. But if you're going to go to fully funding, you're like 492. So we're about 81% funded at transportation in the current budget. So what happens is the local district has to make up for that. But with that being said, there's a lot of things that we're working on with the legislature as far as funding and things of that matter. But also, too, just a reminder that for this group, we're very thankful to have the focus on our students' educational journey. We're looking at from the beginnings in preschool all the way through to the post-secondary degrees and their credentials. We do believe that success starts very early. Starts very early in our preschools. We want our kids to have strong literacy, strong numeracy skills. And we have some data talking about the implementation of letters and the science of reading, how that's increasing with our students. And that's done with collaboration with our General Assembly. But we also believe that students have to have that opportunity for what we call vibrant learning experiences, those relevant, joyful, those passion projects, that project-based learning, defenses of learning, things of that nature, internships, apprenticeships, dual credit, all those things that we want kids to have. But we also want them to grow as communicators. We want them to grow as collaborators. We want them to be critical / creative thinkers. And we want that to lead into lifelong learning, which really points us towards our mission here with the Commonwealth Education Continuum, because we exist to remove barriers throughout that system to make sure that students have that seamless P20 educational journey. That's what we want for our kids. And by aligning those systems from early through post-secondary, we want to make sure our students are on track and we get those strengthened the supports they need to guide each step of the journey. And just like Dr. Thompson pointed out, while our scores are going up, we still have those gaps we need to fill. We have students that maybe student populations that are still falling behind. Maybe those gaps are widening. We want to make sure that they close, not to bring down the students are scoring high, but we want to bring all students up we're at the same level and even higher. So again, that's one of the reasons why we have this group here at CEC. But also too, as this group identified back in November, engaging families in the community to partner with our efforts to help navigate support student success is crucial. It's essential. We've talked about that several times in CEC, and we are very pleased to have Jenny Hobson, who's here from Gear Up, Kentucky, to lead that discussion and brainstorm ways to how can we authentically engage our communities. And I will throw out there, if when I do the legislative update a little bit later, we'll talk a little bit about House Bill 257, which talks about local measures of quality, local accountability. How do we involve our community people, our community leaders, to make sure that students, when they walk across our stages at graduation, that there is an expectation of what the community can expect from each student. So again, we're very thankful for that. And I want to say thank you to everyone that's here. We appreciate our partners. We have David Young, Jim Flynn here as always over across the Capitol lobbying for education, P12, Dr. Hargis, and many others. I hate to start calling names, but it's good to see everyone here. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Ellis. But I'll answer any questions that you may have before we go on. If not, Dr. Ellis, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much. I think you're in for a great meeting today, and I do appreciate everybody being here. So, Robin, I'm going to let you go over our agenda, and we're going to turn it over and get our groups going. You're muted.
That's straight now. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you for the great introduction for the meeting today and for kind of teeing up our conversation. Our objectives for today are to really think about and clarify the CEC's engagement strategies and intended outcomes for two of the priorities that you all identified at the November meeting. One of them is middle school and high school career exploration. This has been a great topic of conversation for several years for the CEC. And so I hope that today we have a panel discussion, and we're happy to welcome not only Tina Young from ESG, but also Dr. Beth Hargis, who's the Associate Commissioner of Career and Technical Education at KDE, and our own Jessica Fletcher and Mitzi Holland, who heads up the Kentucky Advising Academy, to also add to that conversation. So they'll provide a panel discussion of that topic so that we can really have an informed conversation about the strategies and outcomes that the CEC is looking for in that area. We'll also talk about the engagement strategies and intended outcomes for family and community engagement. And as Commissioner Fletcher said, we have Jenny Hobson, who is an expert on family engagement for many years, and she is now the program director for Gear Up Kentucky and their family engagement strategy. So we're really happy to have Jenny to add some research and context for that conversation. We'll also have Commissioner Fletcher and John Hughes and Reagan Satterwhite talk a little bit about some of the current actions and priorities of the Kentucky General Assembly and have a conversation about how that impacts and what impact it has on the CEC's work. So as usual, we have a very tight agenda and full agenda, and so you can see it there on the screen. And without further ado, I want to hand things back over to Amanda to kick off the conversation around middle and high school career exploration.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. So today we are so pleased to have Tina Young for Education Strategies Group. You've seen ESG on and off with us as amazing partners over the past few years. They've also, we've been a part of their launch grant, lots and lots of connections. Most recently, we had, through the leadership of Beth Hargis, Dr. Beth Hargis, excuse me, as the middle school career exploration and advising work. You all have identified long before we have to start early and often. We have talked about the connection with individual learning plans. You all formulated the ideas around futurity. You were talking about the barriers. We've been talking about this for the past 5 years, going on 6, but not just talking, we're acting on it. And one of the things, as Robin said, from November when we had NCEE come and talk about the pillars, that has not gone away. One of your identified next steps that you really wanted to pursue was how do we start early and often? And so that's one of the topics. So without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Tina, because I like for us to always not just look at Kentucky, but to look at the national perspective. Are we an anomaly, or are we really just a part of a bigger issue? The difference between us and everybody else that I want to see is that we act, and we act for change and what's good for students. And so, Tina, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started on this and give us a good perspective.
Apologies, I forgot to take myself off mute. Can you all see my screen? All right, excellent. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk about our work with Kentucky. It has been a joy partnering them across a few of those initiatives that Amanda talked about, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looked like today. I don't need to introduce myself much because Amanda already did so, but my name is Tina Young. I'm a senior associate with Education Strategy Group, and for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, we work to expand economic opportunity by improving educational outcomes. So we share this goal with the Continuum. And just to give you an overview of what we'll be digging into today, we'll sort of start by grounding us in the research context and background. As Dr. Thompson talked about, like grounding us in the data is really important to kind of get a sense of why this is an important issue to date. And then we'll also look at some national findings to give that national perspective that Amanda talked about earlier, and then look at Kentucky's work in our middle school network and the continued work into implementation. So first, that research context. The first study that I'll highlight here is a survey of high school graduates that showed that there was some uncertainty as they were thinking about making decisions about their career and about their post-secondary options. And there's some statistics there that kind of support this. Most high schoolers are graduating feeling very unprepared for life after high school. And a lot of them are reporting that they didn't really have exposure to career exploration while there. Something as simple as even an aptitude test for them to think about, hey, you know, what am I interested in? What are my strengths, and how can I think about a career that might relate to that? A lot of students didn't really have that opportunity according to this study. And so they found that a lot of those students who went on to pursue post-secondary opportunities changed their majors at least 2 times. So we're seeing real time and financial implications for not having the opportunity to explore careers. And just to drive that point home a little bit further, a more recent study showed that only 13% of Gen Z students felt prepared to make a decision about their future. So this is not just a few kids here and there, it's the vast majority of students who are reaching 12th grade, graduating, and not really knowing what the next step for themselves is. And we, share the belief with Kentucky that this work should really start in middle school. And the research really does bear this out. I'm sure we're all aware that most occupations require some sort of post-secondary training, and that can look a variety of ways these days. And so in order to help students prepare to make those post-secondary options decisions, that we need to make sure that we're making space for them to explore careers early on. And middle school really is just the right time for that. Their brains are developing in such a way where they're open to exploring and they're open to planning. And it really is a time where they don't have the demand of high schoolers. So they have a little bit more time and space to really look at these ideas. And then on the flip side of that, this is really the time where we start to see student disengagement. They are at the highest risk for disengaging in schools. And this is where we really start to see the beginning of when we might lose those kids. So making sure that we're making personal connections to what the content that they're learning aligned to a future that they envision for themselves is really, really crucial. And so this is all going to increase the likelihood that they'll successfully pick a post-secondary option that aligns to their own career goals and will, prepare them for a good life and a fulfilling career. And so just to give that national perspective, in addition to that research context, I'll share some findings that came about in a report that we published a couple of years ago called Extending the Runway. Brightbound, formerly American Student Assistance, or ASA, commissioned ESG to conduct an in-depth national scan looking at a variety of offerings that states had for middle school career exploration. And we really organized our analysis into these 3 buckets that you see here. The first thing we did was look at, a state's vision for this work. To what extent did we find evidence that leadership was really defining middle school career exploration and prioritizing this? And then we took a look at the actual policies, right? Like what's on the books, what's been passed by a governing body, what's in statute and rules and regulations to help set the expectation for what this might look like. And then we also took a look at the infrastructure that states had to support, districts and schools in facilitating these experiences for students. So things like funding, professional development, et cetera. But perhaps the most fun and I think impactful piece of our research was engaging a student advisory council. And I know that, we share a value in incorporating student voice with Kentucky, and you all also engage a student advisory council to inform your work. So we we convened some middle schoolers and we wanted to ask them, hey, what does middle school career exploration look like for you? And what do you think it should look like? And so I'm going to share a video that we compiled as a result of that advisory council so you can hear from the students themselves.
I think definitely talking to my family. We don't really talk about careers and stuff in school very often. If we do, it's more like a once in a while thing because like something happened, so we should probably talk about it or something like that. Or it's just like a one day thing, part of like this unit and everything like that.
I learned more about careers like around my family because actually my parents like when I ask them things about careers and how they work.
I feel like I learn more about careers out of school when I do my own research.
Other than like high school's coming and
Oops, I'm sorry about that.
So we should probably talk about it or something like that. Or it's just like a one day thing, part of like this unit and everything like that.
I learned more about careers like around my family because actually my parents like when I ask them things about careers and how they work.
I feel like I learn more about careers out of school when I do my own research.
other than like high school's coming and saying like, yeah, come join our high school, we don't really have any like career fairs that happen.
I feel like if we had like a chance to see what they did, like what the people in the actual jobs like did, and maybe like shadowing them for a day and like learning what they actually did as like a job.
I mean, I think it would be fun like following somebody around for their job for a day. I think it'd just be helpful learning about like different careers and stuff, and like how like the process of like how you get certain careers and like stuff like that.
Picking a job or career, it is important to me is like trying to figure out what you'll actually do in the job. I think I would want to see what they do there, what's like the most important thing in the job, and what like the rules are.
I want to make it like so we'd be able to learn different about different careers, but in a way that's like fun. Because I feel like when you're forced to learn about things, it's kind of just like a seminar where it's just like this, and this, but we're not really, we don't really have like activities or anything to do to make it more fun. And I think I remember it more when I'm like doing something hands-on while learning about it.
Yeah, I just feel like they could like focus more on like career exploration instead of like doing like the same other presentations over and over again, because honestly like one or two things changes there like every time we do one, but in like career exploration, like every like there's new fields like of careers, there's new like opportunities, and we just don't explore those often enough, I feel like. So maybe like doing like hands-on experience with like the jobs would be like, because then people could actually like see what you do in that like job and maybe like understand it better.
I think, I don't quite know if they have this already, but I think we could write in our what we want it to be, and then on the side you could say what would you want to do to get more into it, and then maybe if they find a bunch of kids with that, they can sign them up for something or ask their parents if they want to do it, and then they'll get more into it.
I would want to definitely learn more about careers in school and about the talent portfolio schools.
Right. All right, so we heard from the kiddos, and I'd love to know if anything that the students said resonated with you, if anything that the students said made you rethink how we should approach career exploration and advising. And I don't know if you're sharing in the chat, but I can't see when I'm sharing my screen. So if Amanda, if you see any comments come through that you'd like to share, please highlight those for me.
I mean, I think I've said this before and I'll continue to say it again. It's got to be an intentional class with someone who's very passionate about that, almost like a college advisor, a career advisor person that, it is invested in helping kids figure out what they want to do or the top things that they may be interested in, versus kind of a landing space for someone who maybe has run their 10-year life or, is going to put them on a program and just do that. It's got to be engaging, and the person who does it needs to be passionate about it, versus it just being a throwaway class.
Right, absolutely. Like they said loud and clear, like they want the hands-on experience, right? Like they want it to be engaging. They don't want to check the box. All right. Any other thoughts somebody would like to share?
Yeah, Tina, Debbie just said in the chat, hands-on approaches are beneficial to them. And I think they said that multiple times. The students really emphasize that experience.
Right. And I think this aligns with like kind of generally how instruction should go, right? Like they're going to learn more when they're really being able to kind of get into it. So, I just wanted to kind of keep this in the back of their brain as we talk about all of this work, kind of what they're responding to. And so I'll move on now just to talk about like what we found from our 50 state scan. And some
Hey,
of
Tina, can I ask you something before you go there? Just
yes,
as understanding.
absolutely.
I've had a chance to speak with middle school classrooms too in different parts of the state, inner cities, and in rural places. It's interesting the nomenclature when I talk about careers versus jobs and how they understood those two somewhat differently at that particular age. Were y'all able to nuance things like differing communities, different language, different nomenclature, any of that as you were asking these questions?
You know what? That is a great point. We didn't really hit with the nuance between career and job is really interesting. And I know in some of our other work, like particularly with our social capital work, we understand that the way students are receiving the information and the way they interpret it is going to impact how they interact with it when they get those experiences. But as part of this study, we didn't really parse out career versus job. Were they looking at those two things differently? But that's really interesting. And I think I'm going to kind of file that away as we continue this work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question and a great point. As we moved on, I mean, kind of speaking of definitions, one of our big takeaways was that states were defining and, identifying middle school career exploration as an important component of a kid's experience. But we also found that this is largely living at the state agency level, right? This isn't being something that's filtered out into the broader ecosystem of partners who can help deliver those hands-on experiences. And in terms of policy, again, folks are defining it. They're usually using language like career exploration. And I would have to kind of look deeper to see if like job career exploration, like what an analysis of that might look like. But they are at least defining it, and they're defining expectations for districts and schools. But we did find that largely states are not leveraging that those career exploration activities and expectations in their data collection processes or in their accountability mechanisms. And so states are saying, hey, you all need to give, make sure students have career exploration experiences, but they're not monitoring it to make sure that they're quality. So that was a huge gap that we found in this analysis. And then finally, in terms of infrastructure, we found that students are providing, or states rather, are providing supports for districts and schools to carry out this work, but there's more room to grow to, again, facilitate those more meaningful hands-on experiences. In addition to our big national analysis, we did state profiles for all 50 states and also the District of Columbia, and we found that Kentucky was a leading state. It was very clear based on our research that you all care about this work. It's codified in your statutes. It's spelled out in your standards. There's very strong, robust requirements for ILP. And unlike a lot of the other states that, in terms of what I just talked about with data collection, you all are actually making an effort to collect what ILP completion looks like in districts and schools. And so that is, again, something that stood out to us just because a lot of states are not doing that. And then we also see some dedicated funding for these efforts. And so Kentucky definitely stood out as the cream of the crop. And so it came as no surprise that when it came time to convene a network of states to advance this work nationwide, we invited Kentucky to be a part of that. And we're so fortunate that Kentucky was part of our inaugural Impact and Learning Middle School Career Exploration Network. Shout out to Dr. Beth Hargis and Dr. Amanda Ellis for serving as state leads for the Kentucky team. But just to give you a sense of what we did last year, we built a coalition of catalyst states. So those leading states, based on the research that we did for extending the runway. And we looked at two different goals over the course of the year. So first we had a field facing goal where we wanted to kind of set an agenda and also develop some other tools to help states who weren't as far along as these 5 that you see here. And then we also had a state serving goal where we helped provide some support so that states could develop their own plans to further enhance their effort. And I know that Kentucky has developed a robust 3-year implementation plan to take you all even further. In terms of what we developed together, the first is a joint commitment statement that has 5 guiding principles for middle school career exploration, along with the research to back that up. This should be released to the public this week, so that's very exciting. And you'll notice there at the bottom that Dr. Fletcher has also signed this commitment to signal Kentucky's prioritization of middle school career exploration. And hopefully when this goes out, this will encourage continued sign on from other states to signify their commitment to this work. And then another thing we developed is a model policy set, which can serve as a framework for states to help facilitate the policies that are going to help encourage this work at the district and school level. And so they're organized in the 4 buckets that you see here. And just kind of like as a side story, when we convened the states in October in person to give us feedback for not only how these policies were shaping up, but how we can help make sure that states implement these with fidelity, what tools would they need. I happened to be at the Kentucky table listening in on the discussion, and it was very robust. And it was clear to me that there was such a commitment to not only having these policies, which you all already have codified in a lot of places, but making sure that these are implemented with fidelity. And really, you could tell that the Kentucky team was thinking about how they can push themselves further to make sure that these were that what was going on at the school and school building level was meeting the spirit of these policies. So that was a really fun discussion to hear. And that brings me to implementation in Kentucky and our continued work with them. So Amanda Ellis talked earlier about the various initiatives that we've worked on with Kentucky. On the left there, you'll see that middle school career exploration network represented. And on the right, you'll see our launch work with Kentucky. There are 4 launch states as part of this network that are focusing on navigation and advising in particular. And you'll see that Kentucky is highlighted on both of these maps. So it's really just kind of showing a commitment that you all have to this work. And as part of that launch initiative and continuing implementation, creating implementation tools, we have started off with a middle school scope and sequence. So on the left there, you'll see that we have overarching career exploration goals for each grade in middle school. And on the right, we've developed an advising focus so that a school building leader can look at this and try to integrate it into their school culture. And we're continuing that work with a high school scope and sequence. And so this is coming together as we speak. We are still we're close to developing a final draft here. But the idea is that they're going to continue those career exploration activities that they started in middle school and in the beginning of high school, just kind of thinking about, how am I designing my high school experience to align with the career and post-secondary goals I have for myself, and then really working toward a space where those kind of upper high school students can make decisions and take some action so that when they graduate high school, they're not one of the students that I talked about at the top of this presentation who are graduating and don't know what path to take and where to go. And to accompany the scope and sequence, we're developing some lesson plans and learner experiences so that a practitioner can take this and really run with it. As much as we can, we are incorporating futurity throughout the scope and sequence so that students can take advantage of all the resources there. And then finally, we are developing a student-facing tool, an individual learning plan template that has all the career exploration and advising and financial literacy experiences that they should be engaging with in middle and high school. And it's a place for them to kind of keep track of it. It's a place for practitioners to kind of guide them through it so that it's, again, something meaningful and they understand like all the expectations that are that Kentucky has for what they should experience as it relates to career exploration. So it is a lot of exciting, there are a lot of exciting tools coming together in Kentucky. And I'm just grateful that I've been able to partner with the team on this work. And so I'm happy to answer any additional questions you may have, but Amanda, I know you want to also have a panel discussion, so I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, please feel free, Tina, amazing. Thank you. And please feel free to put any questions in the chat. Make note of what Phil had said in the chat about it's more than just exposure to the career, but it's really understanding the student and where they are in their life. And Phil, I think the big point on what you were saying is that we certainly, when we say career exploration, it does not mean a lifelong career commitment at the age of 12 and 13. It truly is exploration, which may just mean, what are you good at? What are you interested in? And so it's a good way to introduce. We'll do a brief panel. It's with Dr. Beth Hargis, of course. We'll have Tina available as well, Jessica Fletcher for Futurity, and Mitzi Holland for KAA. And so I just want to ask, this is just conversational, just so you guys can get some perspective. And one of the reasons we're doing this is, number one, you've always had this as a priority and you want to keep pushing. And I love that because we keep making incredible progress around this and connecting dots. But this is also something that was identified as a true need and was not occurring. And so there's been a lot of effort, but we need you to be thinking as CEC members of what comes next. And as you're hearing this conversation, how do we engage as a continuum and in what ways? And so, I'm going to start off with anybody, but specifically probably with Dr. Hargis or Mitzi. But what does meaningful implementation look like beyond the compliance? Tina mentioned that, we have the policies in Kentucky. We have a lot of policies in Kentucky of good practice, but it's the implementation part that sometimes is not there. And how are we ensuring that every student experiences this work with quality and purpose? So Beth, do you want to kick us off with that? And then we'll go to Mitzi.
Sure, happy to. Thank you. One of the things I think that we heard one of the students say in the video was consistency. And so when you're thinking about implementation, we have regulation 704 KAR 305 in place, which says that all districts will implement an advising and guidance process. But it kind of stops there. So what does that actually look like? And so, I firmly believe that districts are doing the best they can in implementing this. And, there is some good work that's going on out there. We know that. But we would like for it to be more consistent across the state. And as far as implementation, it's got to have some student input. That's the second time I think I've seen that video, but yet that really resonates because as adults, I think we can be really, we can say, well, this is how we need to do it because we're the experts, we're the adults, and we're going to tell them how it needs to be. But it's really important that we stop and talk to those students and figure out what they need in order to be able to make these decisions. And I think another piece of the implementation is we need a collaborative effort on this. And I think we have the beginnings of that in place. But when we come together as a team, I can't tell you how valuable the meetings that we've had over the past year have been. You know, we have learned, or at least I've learned a lot about what effective career exploration is and perhaps what it isn't. And so a lot of the things that I thought, you know, have gone out the door. So I've had a new perspective. So for me, meaningful implementation, there has to be quality, and I'm sure we'll bring that up again, but consistency, a collaborative development in order to get this so that we're making something that all districts can use.
Yeah, thank you. Mitzi, do you want to add to that, you or Jessica, and then specifically around that partnership that Beth referred to?
I will add that, you know, in the work that we've been doing, to Dr. Hargis's point, there are a lot of great initiatives taking place across Kentucky, but oftentimes due to gaps in resources and capacity, things fall through the cracks. With the scope and sequence that we're working on in partnership with ESG, we are really being intentional about taking into account student needs and interests. And it's more about what do you like? What are you interested in? Not what do you want to be when you grow up? And it being a tradition or being, an aligned experience or experiences that support those interests and connect those interests to career clusters. We want it to be a meaningful student-owned process, that students are using data that they are gaining from those experiences to make informed decisions. It's also about putting the resources in the hands of the practitioners and not letting it fall solely on one or two people within a school, but it being a true school-wide collaborative approach where all stakeholders have the resources and the information that they need to support students in making those well-informed decisions.
Yeah. Jessica, do you want to connect that with Futurity and what our efforts are with that?
So I will say right now, with Futurity having been live for a year, we celebrated our 1-year anniversary on February 3rd. We really now have a place that all schools and all students can go to get a unified answer on their Kentucky specific college and career questions. I think that's huge. Previously, as schools were using various platforms for ILP collection, whether they were using Zello or Pathful or ACE, there was lots of different sources and all of those data points might not have matched. So I think now we really have the opportunity to be telling all Kentucky students the true opportunities that are out there for them in the state. And with the continued expansion of Futurity, we are really able to tell that story on different grade levels. So last week we announced the new redesign of the homepage of Futurity. And if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I would recommend just going to futurity.org and kind of clicking through the drop downs under IMA, because you can see that there are selections for middle school student, and both high school and middle school are aligned to ILP guidelines for those specific grade levels. So the selections you will see for middle school student are directly related to what those middle school students are expected to do before they enter high school. So we're really trying to think of new and innovative ways to bring that information to them that is informative, but also fun to use and keeps them engaged. So that's really our priority, especially as it relates to specifically the middle school audience. But we're really trying to do that across all age groups and grade levels.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask one more question. From your perspective, what is still needed? Tina, do you want to weigh in on that briefly, just what you're seeing, or you can do that at the end after they've responded? It's totally up to you.
I would echo a lot of what Mitzi and Dr. Hart just said, I think that a whole school advising approach is really the way to do this. And that's just the training to make sure that, teachers, every adult in the building understands how to connect what they're learning to careers. I taught social studies for a really long time, and I could think of so many missed opportunities where we were talking about content and I could see something light up for a student. And I could have said, like, hey, you're interested in how Rome was built, urban planning is a thing, right? And so just building a muscle across more than just the school counselor so that everybody in the building is contributing to this, and then just dedicating time today to Dr. Hargis's point about consistency. You all talked about budget at the beginning of this, like, how they say budget reflects your values. I feel like the master schedule reflects your values as well. And so if that's something that's built in, that it's expected, like, we're going to talk about this on a consistent basis, I think students can start to build that muscle to see how what they're learning is connecting to careers, and then continually evaluate their interests, and seek opportunities out to get them to their goals.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ladies, do you all want to weigh in on what's still needed that hasn't been mentioned already?
One thing that we are adding into Futurity over the next year is really tying in how students not just better understand what careers are out there, but how to plan financially for what is to come once they actually get in that career. So we're in the process of building a budget calculator. So with that, I think will come some additional financial literacy lessons to really drive the point home that, you shouldn't just look at what you want to do, but is that going to be enough to sustain you and your family? And yes, middle school is a really early time to start thinking about that, but it's also the best time because the longer you're kind of surrounded by it, the more it's going to be instilled.
That's right. Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing if I could.
Sure.
I also think that in addition to everything that Tina said and Jessica said, social capital and networking is something that's super important when we're talking about supporting students in their college and career journey. Letting them understand how building a network, even in middle school, maybe it's friends, families, church members, whomever, but that network will grow and become future employers and, college admissions counselors and things like that. So it's super important for students to understand how building that network of support can enable them. And then I just want to reiterate that it has to be a culture. It has to be a school-wide culture. I saw a quote from NCAN the other day that said, in an economy where most jobs that pay a living wage require post-secondary education, advising in high school should be an entitlement the same way that English and social studies is an entitlement for students. So I just want to say too, thanks to everyone here for supporting the advising work and realizing its importance.
And to end, I think I would say that we need support. That is still needed. This is not mandated, it's not legislated. There's nothing out there right now that says all districts will have to do it this way or, at least attempt this. And so we need support. And our hope is that we are going to put together such a good plan and that we will have districts piloting it, that we are going to have others that will want to jump on and participate. And there needs to be continuous improvement. We're not perfect, obviously, no one is. So we want to have that continuous improvement embedded so that we are looking at this and that we're continually revising so that we're meeting the needs of students. So I think it's a great team, and I'm very appreciative to ESG for putting this together and for selecting us to work on it. But anything that you can do in your communities, get involved. Again, it's not one person that does middle school exploration. We need all stakeholders involved. And so that's, I think, my biggest ask from the CEC. Thank you.
Beth, you could not have teed that up any better. And so actually, Robin is going to, first of all, thank you, panelists. What I'm going to do, or what Robin's going to do, is put a poll for all the CEC members. And so you should be able to, here in a moment, take a poll on where should the CEC prioritize its influence to strengthen middle school and high school career exploration and advising statewide. So you're going to rank order these, and we're going to show you the response here in just a moment. So if you will, on your screen, take that poll. Take a minute to respond, please. Even if you're a guest, please feel free. Okay, a few more. And I would say, Robin, let's go on and, oh, wait a minute, we got another. Okay. Do you want to share those, Robin? I can't tell because I can see it all. There we go. So if you look, it looks like our 31% for high priority for policy and legislative recommendations, 56% for cross-sector alignment, funding and resource, 81%, advocacy, data, accountability, and shared metrics, 38% for high priority, and communication is 56%. So it looked like our cross-sector alignment, our funding and communication were the top priorities. So who would like to speak to that? What do you see when you say the funding piece? Do you mean advocacy for funding on that, to continue to pursue private dollars to implement? Give me some insight on this, because this will really help push our work forward as a continuum and to make sure that we are representing well as well. Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
Amanda, I'm going to jump in if you don't mind.
Please.
Because I have to leave in a little bit to go over here and do this TV thing. But
yes,
I guess I want to say all of those need to be together, right? I mean, and so often one leads the other.
That's right.
I think we are going to have funding, right? I think we can come together and develop good policy and protocols. But funding is crucial in this case because it's going to take people and time and efforts and so on. And should it be philanthropy helping? Without a doubt. But you have to remember what we're talking about here is crucial. I love what Mitzi said she heard from NCAN. What we're talking about here is crucial to the state's economy. It's crucial for us to look at it in that way. So we have to think about it truly as an investment, not just in the quantity of getting more kids ready to go into the economy with education they need, but quality. The idea that the earlier we do this, the less churning that happens, the more happiness things happen. I mean, it has to be done in a very holistic way. So I would argue that we have to make a commitment in this state to that. We can find some, what I think outside funding has to be the icing on the cake. But I think we need money for cake mix, if you will.
Yeah. Who wants to add on to that? I agree. Communication, statewide promotion, was also a big factor on this as a high priority.
I will just echo that we have been working really hard to make sure that all districts know about Futurity and understand the work that we're doing with KAA. But it's still a constant uphill battle. So I think the more that we can find ways to be integrated with the work that is going on in schools, things like House Bill 307, I think are going to be very helpful in helping spread the word about about our work, but communications is absolutely critical that people even know that this is a resource that they can tap into for Kentucky specific information.
Yeah, and the resources that Tina referred to and Mitzi will be available this summer. And so the scope and sequences, it will be free. It is aligned to the K-12 standards, financial literacy standards, and the college and career, or excuse me, the career essential skills, all of it. It is all aligned, but it's a user-friendly tool to use. And so that's why we're trying to get that out as well. In the chat, just for the sake of time, so we stay on, there's a couple of things. There are questions on if you are aware of any existing or potential partnerships or models that you would like for us to dig into or pursue. Please drop that in the chat. Stakeholder engagement opportunities, things we may not know about that you think would be helpful. So an example of that is, just because I can see David Young right on my screen, is that I know Mitzi and KAA have reached out, and they will be going to every single co-op to talk about the opportunities for advising career exploration resources. That ties in with Futurity. It ties in with the middle school concept work. And so that is something that's already going to take place. And we're so appreciative of all those partnerships, of course, working with KDE to get all those connections. So that's always super helpful. And then the existing or potential funding opportunities, as Dr. Thompson was talking about, it's more than just getting money, but are there opportunities for us to really expand or partner with those who can help us advance this work? But we will definitely be looking into these opportunities and continue to keep you updated. And then how we're going to measure how we are putting forth our effort to move the lever towards more increased access for our students. So stay tuned. Before we start our second, which I think actually Dr. Hargis, you would think we paid her, but we didn't. But she and others were talking about the importance of community. And you all have emphasized, especially in November, you're like, how do we get these people involved? How do we get the community involved? How do we inform parents? Lots of advice for all these folks. And so we have Jenny Hobson to share with us. But before we do, I saw that the Lieutenant Governor was able to come in. I know she's super busy too. We've got you guys on the busiest season. But Lieutenant Governor, would you just like to say a couple words? I apologize for the delay on that.
That's okay. I was enjoying listening to everybody, but thank you guys so much for coming together to do this work and to keep everything going. I know Dr. Thompson and I are probably going to be popping in and out, but it's really nice to hear everything that's going on right now. It's nice to hop on here and be with people who are fighting the good fight. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. So Jenny, I'm going to turn it over to you and kind of give us some things to think about when we talk about community and family engagement. What does that mean, especially in those transition times? We always tend to think about little kids, which are very important, but it's just as important for family and community support as our young people grow and have these transitions into their next level of education or workforce. So I'll turn it to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to chat with you all today and to think about family and community engagement together. If you want to go to the next slide. And I'll say nothing that I'm going to say about family and community engagement is going to shock you because you already have so many experiences with family engagement in your life. So I'd invite everybody in this room to just take a minute to think about who has been on your team from the time you were a kid, perhaps until today, to help you get to be the person who's in this room having this conversation today. And I'm guessing that when you think about your top 4 or 5 people, somewhere in there, there's family, maybe immediate family, maybe extended family, maybe chosen family. But we know that nobody has gotten here today all on their own. And so we know from our own experience that when schools and families partner together to support student success, students do better now and they do better in the long term. It makes sense to us. But I'll also say that we now have 50 plus years of research into family and community engagement, and we now have a lot of data around the fact that students do better when families and schools work together. And I'm particularly excited this week, a big mixed method study that's come out from Learning Heroes that's showing a strong connection, particularly between family engagement and school attendance. And I can share a link with that with you all later, but that's some exciting research that's just out last week. So even though we know how important family engagement is, engaging families is correctly perceived as one of the toughest things that educators do. It's a hard lift. And so what makes it difficult? Lots of different factors. Educators don't receive a lot of training engaging with families. When kids are little, there are so many entry points and there are so much infrastructure in schools for family engagement. As teenagers come on the scene, those opportunities get narrower and narrower, even though we know that teenagers need those caring adults just as much as little guys. And then schools and families have changed over the decades, and some of those changes are very positive. Like schools no longer look like rows of desks and silent worksheets, and they haven't for a long time. But our families may struggle to think about how to connect to their child's education when it doesn't look like what it looked like when they were getting their education. And then some of the changes are more challenging, right? We are all carrying trauma of living through a pandemic and some of the loss of trust and communication that we have. And then in rural states in Kentucky, you know, we're living with the trauma of an opioid epidemic and what that has done to families and family structures. But with all that being said, I want to point out one little factoid to you. This came out from a NYU study done here in Kentucky for the Kentucky Collaborative for Families and Schools. They asked families to identify what's your top barrier to not being engaged in your child's education. 72% listed their busy schedules. So, and that was more than double of any other roadblock to engaging with their students' education, more than transportation, more than not feeling welcome, more than, you know, their kid not wanting them to be involved. Busy schedule. When you go, and so that leads to the thing that I have heard from school professionals for years, which is we sent the information home, but the parents didn't get it. And I think we all know that having information does not necessarily lead to a change in behavior. I, for example, have all of the information. I've been given all the information I could possibly need on the importance of lifting weights at this stage in my life. Ask me if it has changed my behavior. It hasn't. So let's think about, we will get back to the importance of information and families having it, but let's think about if information having doesn't change behavior. What are families actually doing to support their students' learning? And a lot of these things are invisible because they happen in the home. And I'd point you out to a couple of these in particular. First of all, that communicate high expectations. When it comes to, in particular, high school family engagement, that is the thing we know works in terms of changing students' long-term outcomes in life success, is that families are having conversations at home about high expectations. They need information to do that. And then the fourth point, they're guiding their child and navigating from start to finish. We're so fortunate in having families to have someone that follows a child from birth or shortly after birth until hopefully until that parent passes away. They are on their child's team for their whole life. They don't pass them on to a new grade. They have the big picture. We can go to the next slide. So we know that families are doing high expectations, supports, advocacy at every age and stage, but it looks different and it should look different as students change grade levels and change life stages. So just to sum up sort of what's the difference when we think about early childhood, you know, we're thinking child's first teacher. When we think about those elementary years, families are supporting their children into becoming this person who has a job. You have a job, you go to school every day, you learn to do math, you learn to read, you learn to get along with others. And then, oh boy, middle school, blessings on any of you that have middle schoolers, it's providing structure and support for somebody who is taking their first big steps of independence. High school, we've already talked about those high expectations and conversations. And then even into young adulthood, parents are moving into that consultant role. And I turned off my phone for this meeting because my 23-year-old child has the day off, and I know that it's likely I could be called in for consulting on should I go to grad school, should I cook this kind of gray meat in my refrigerator in the next hour. Something that came across my wire yesterday was a study showing that half of students in college are in daily contact with their families. So I just thought that was interesting. Okay, we can go to the next. So if we know that just sharing information does not work, what do we know about what works in terms of engaging families? This comes out of the work of Dr. Karen Mapp, who is what I call the mother of family engagement. Her work in the dual capacity framework sort of forms the foundation for family engagement in the federal government and federal funding opportunities, as well as family-friendly schools right here in Kentucky. And so her work shows that family engagement impacts student outcomes when it's relational, meaning there's give and take, trust, conversation back and forth. When it's linked to learning, we can do all kinds of fluffy family engagement, but to have impact on outcomes, it has to be linked to learning. And then finally, students and their families and schools don't exist in silos. They are communities. Without the community, it doesn't move forward. If you want to go back one and then forward one, I think we've got the parent gaps. Or maybe not. It's okay. Let's think about what's going on in the state of Kentucky in family engagement. And I want to say that Kentucky brings a lot of strengths to family engagement. I've had the opportunity to travel around the country, meet folks from all kinds of different states, and nothing is quite like Kentucky because we have baked in family engagement ever since CARA. Thinking about family resource centers and the way that, they remove non-academic barriers and the ways that they work on kindergarten readiness, looking at school-based decision-making councils. About 4 years ago, I did a review of school report cards around the nation. No one reports as much information on parent elections, parent-teacher conferences, volunteer hours on their report card the way that we do now. Now, it's not to say that that's perfect. Often it is compliance-based or checking a box. But in Kentucky, we have this advantage that we are at least thinking about family engagement. If I went into any school in Kentucky and said, do you have parent voice in decision-making, they'd give me the look of, you're not from here, because of course we have school-based decision-making councils. Other strengths we had, I'm not going to talk too much about futurity because we just heard about that, but we do have statewide tools that are available to everybody, media campaigns for organizations like Gear Up that I'm part of. And then if you look at resources that are available to schools through the Pritchard Committee, we have the Family Friendly School Certification that KDE recognizes. That's a resource for schools. And we have the Long-Term Commonwealth Institute for Parent Leadership. And I saw there's at least a couple other SIPL fellows on this call besides myself. So we have opportunities for parents and families to become leaders. If I think about, okay, where are the gaps then? First of all, I think we need more opportunities post-pandemic for parents and caregivers to learn from each other. They value each other. They learn from each other. I'd point out Fayette County right now, who's doing a lot of really exciting things about bringing families together with some funding sources they've had, but I don't know that that's really the work of this council. The other thing I'll point out, and then we won't think any more about it, it's just something that's been in my head lately, is what supports do young adults in post-secondary need in engaging their families themselves while they're also building their very strong independence. And then finally, we need stronger connections between schools and community champions so that those community champions can serve as trusted messengers. We have a lot of efforts around community engagement, but I would say we don't yet have something systemic or transformative in a way that addresses family knowledge gaps. So why community champions? Every community has them. They are that person that everybody knows, or who does everything and who you go to if you have a question. Those champions are different people in different roles in every community, but they exist everywhere. And it goes back to this idea that family engagement is relational, because those community champions already have trusting relationships with families. They share common language with families. They're not bogged down in our acronyms the way that we can get in the educational sector. They are already trusted. They're accessible because they are where families are, and they keep the big picture in mind. So the question that I would have for you as you think about this is sort of a what would a system look like of community champions supporting family engagement in education? This is already happening in pockets. There are all kinds of people doing this across the Commonwealth, but what if it were the norm? And I just want to think a little bit more deeply about a couple of these. We know that pastors are encouraging kids to go to school. But what if they had a toolkit of evidence-based text messages they could share out on their church texting platform? Because we know from the school side, the text messages are a huge mover of attendance outcomes. What if youth group leaders who are already telling kids that they can do what they want in the future, what if they had the information to share about the opportunities kids have now? So if they could say, hey, remember that time the church van broke down and you looked under the hood with me? Did you know you could do automotive right here at our ATC? So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about nowadays in terms of community engagement. And so my question for you would be, what I'd like to leave you with is, what would it mean for a group like this to provide tools that support community champions in engaging families and the rest of their communities for student success? I'm going to argue that that may be where the next big step is. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. And actually, what I want you to do is, Robin, if you could go back 2 slides where Jenny had the ideas that she was, yes, the what if. I would love for you to either unmute or put in the chat either ideas or things that you all have experienced, or maybe you lead either in your professional or private life, or many of you all are engaged in incredible community outreach groups. And so this was brought up a lot in November, and we haven't hit on this, especially around what we do in all the transition, like I said, life changes and our roles as families and our roles as community members. And so this is also a topic that's brought up at the CPE board meeting a lot when we talk about data and student outcomes. Our members, which I'm so grateful for, and I know it happens with the KBE because I hear it when I watch their board meetings as well, as well, who is sharing this with the families? Who's sharing this with the community they live in? And so I know there's some incredible outreach and some civic groups that do some incredible work. Fill us with ideas of what you have experienced or you've thought of. You can put that in the chat or you can unmute. Let's have a discussion about this, because this is really going to drive how we move forward with this work. In a work group to really kind of pull some resources together and some easier ways for folks to be able to support the young people growing up, their future leaders, their future employees in the communities. So please share.
So Amanda, I'll share.
Yeah, great.
I have always spoken up for the fact of how important our community-based organizations are, and that we need to be pulling every single lever, because we never know who the students are going to be relating to, who's going to be their mentors, who's going to be those adults that are in their lives. Not all of our students have traditional adults in their lives like parents who can be there for them. We saw that stat about busy schedules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we do a luncheon once a year to say thank you for to our community-based partners.
Okay.
Make sure they know updates. So I think that's something that the more of us could do, the more we would make sure that those people are aware and that they appreciate and they know that we acknowledge how important it is.
Absolutely.
The other group that I think sometimes gets lost, especially with how high profile sports is now, and that is our club coaches. So not just our high school coaches, but our club coaches that
Love that.
are with those young people, sometimes from Friday afternoon until Sunday night. And they've got lots of downtime where they're, where they have an influence and they have an opportunity. And so the more we can educate all of these people about these messages, the better.
Love it. Thank you, Jenny. I'm just writing it all down. Jump in. I know there are many of you all. Yeah, go Kim. Sorry.
I'll jump in. Yeah, sure. So I know most of you all on here know, Kia, obviously we have have for many, many years, a very extensive outreach program. So just wanted to, remind everyone that we have outreach staff across the state, literally in every corner. And a lot of times I do think we get associated with schools because that's where we do a lot of work during the school year. But we do a lot of engagement with community-based organizations as well. I'm looking at the list from Jenny's presentation. And, aside from maybe nurses and doctors, I can't say we're in medical offices a lot with our outreach programming. But aside from that one, I think all of those other, organizations we're engaging with in some way to ensure that they have resources, whether it's print resources, free workshops, FAFSA assistance, you name it, we do it. So certainly just wanted to plug that for this group. And if there's a community organization in your area that you feel like could benefit, we have a staff member, in that area that I'm sure can come and provide some resources and some support for them. So
wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for that reminder. I think you're right. I think we associate a lot of times the coaches with schools instead of other community-based organizations. What else? You guys have all kinds of connections. That's the beauty of this group. Someone brought up to me nail salons. Oh, Jenny or Penny, jump in, please. Sorry.
So this is my wheelhouse.
Yes, I do. That's why I've been waiting for you to unmute.
Several things, but when I think we need to realize a few things, and I'm thinking about when we talk about higher ed and secondary and post-secondary education, family engagement looks different.
It does.
And the interesting thing about that is family engagement at that level begins at the elementary and middle, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm always going to plug PTA. So we're going to put Kentucky PTA on that list.
Yep.
Because we want a PTA in every school. But here's what's more important at this point. There's a difference between parent involvement and family engagement. Parent involvement is transactional. Family engagement is relational, right? Mm-hmm. So at the post-secondary level, I saw FAFSA on the list, right? We talk about dual credit and FAFSA and advanced courses. There's always an equity component there. So when I hear someone say that we're going to offer this information, or at this event, we're going to hand parents information, what do you do after you hand them that information? Because that's involvement. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You did that transaction. Well, I've given you this information. Now what you do with it is up to you. Incorrect. I need to follow up with you and figure out how that following up looks to make sure that, say, parents that look like me understand that my child has a place in a dual credit course, understands that I need to follow up on how to do the FAFSA, right? So don't just give them the information. What do you do after they've been given the information? Because most of them will not contact you and say, hey, thanks for that information. Now, what do I do? The onus is always on the person who has the information.
Sure.
Be it the teacher, the principal, or whoever it is, right? So, and when we talk about moving forward, right at my youngest kid had a 504. How is that going to translate into post-secondary, right? She went to culinary school.
Yep.
But they had a department, and her 504, her accommodations followed her, right? Mm-hmm. So if I don't do the legwork, or if I don't have someone who can walk me through that, that's a huge opportunity that's missed to continue with how to make sure these children succeed.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, Penny, because one of the things that we're doing under Dr. Dawn Offit, she will be leading a community of practice around students with disabilities. And actually, we came to CKEC to get some feedback from the special ed co-op and some others. And there is a massive disconnect, not an unwillingness by any means, but a massive disconnect on the understanding of helping students in the high school transition to any kind of post-secondary training, institution, whatever. And it is such a difference in vocabulary and access and what those things mean. And so that's something that we have really have committed to focusing on, because the percentage of students with disabilities, which campuses don't know that. They have no idea, but it's so small. And to that population, when we talk to students, if you remember 5 years ago when we were talking about what a successful transition to post-secondary looked like, we had a student who said, I had an IEP in high school. Nobody talked to me about going to college. They only said, go get a job. I'm in a liberal arts private school, killing it right now. And I wish somebody would have said something. And that quote has never, obviously I didn't quote it exactly, but that statement never left me. And I'm fiercely an advocate around that. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is something we have been talking about here in higher ed. And we even have folks who are asking more. More of our campuses are saying, what else do we do? How do we reach out? I know Jenny does, and many of the others, but we need to talk about that.
And I think
it has to happen.
A great resource would be Carl Perkins, right? Disability resources. Every college has a disabilities resources office, but we don't know that. So if we had someone from Carl Perkins to come in and talk about those steps, right?
Right. And there's TRIO programs that a lot of folks don't even know exist for students with disabilities or any type of special needs. They just know about the ADA office. Jenny Hobson, you had your hand raised. My apologies. I can get all of my soapbox on this.
Well, I'm just going to hop on the soapbox.
Yeah,
too,
please.
Which is, I'm currently going through the process as a parent of student with disabilities right now. And I'm thinking about, the world changed with IDEA, and we now have a huge number of students who are able to go to college, who have post-secondary options because they've had this world opened up to them in elementary, middle, high school. There's got to be a way at the post-secondary level for students to engage their families in the way that's helpful, because it really has been the families that have been their case managers in large part for the first 18 years. But there's got to be a way we can figure this out without violating FERPA.
Yep. Good. Other thoughts and ideas?
Amanda, I'm thinking about at the high school level, we have many student organizations, including our career and technical student organizations, National Honor Society. A lot of these, what we used to refer to as clubs have community service projects that they have to do. And so, we've had students set up at a mall and take blood pressures or something, and so I think that's a great, useful way to get information out, because kids will take a project on and run with it and, see it through to fruition. So I think that's probably something that we sometimes overlook, and we let them come up with their own ideas. But I think if we could open up some communication there, it would might open some doors.
Yes, thank you. And students are usually more brave to say things and go after things more so than adults a lot of times, which is what I love about them. Yes, Commissioner Fletcher, please.
I think one of the things that keep coming to mind as we go through each one of these topics are those first generation students that are the first time that they would go on to college or to a post-secondary institution. Again, support all throughout, but also too, just knowing that this is possible for them. And going back to what Penny said earlier, what exactly do we do to follow up? It's one thing to hand a parent who's never been to a college or university at all, or a post-secondary institution, a FAFSA, link, but what do we do after? How do we follow up with them? And I really, what's in the back of my mind always are those students that are first generation that are moving forward. So that strategy may look a little different, may have more supports, and that could be for any student, that whether it be a special needs student, or if you're a first generation student, there has to be a special support system for that. How does that come to fruition, and how do we follow up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that real challenge is the follow-up, the intentionality and the relationship piece, I think is key. And I appreciate that comment and challenge. Because we do a whole lot of hot dogs, free hot dogs and chili and information, but we don't always follow up. So
Well,
I
and
think
that's why
that
the family engagement is so important for that group. To
absolutely.
pull
Well,
them in because I'll be open with this group. My parents never graduated high school. Matter of fact, never made it to high school. They were afraid of the building.
sure.
And it wasn't anything anybody, they knew the people in the building and loved them outside the building, but the building itself was an obstacle for them because they'd never been there. So
Sure.
again, those kind of things keep resounding back to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I welcome any other feedback ideas. Robin and I will take this back and definitely put some ideas together on this work group. I'm excited about this one, and this one scares me a little bit because it could be big, but we've never been afraid of big, and it is desperately needed. And so I think to Jenny's point, we had a lot of really good resources already, so we're not starting from scratch, but it's really actuating some of these things and getting behind it. So I would love to. And Jenny Sawyer just asked a question, and Commissioner, I don't know, there's DD wasn't able to join today, but does KDE capture data on who would be first gen? Not to my knowledge, but I don't know that for sure.
I'd have to go back and look at, there might be something in Infinite Campus, but I'm not sure if that's not an ad hoc report or something to that nature. So that's something I would have to look for.
Usually first generation flags come from FAFSA filing. So that's typically where it would be, but there's a little bit of inconsistency there.
Okay, good. We'll dig into that a little more too, of even how it's defined too, because it is defined differently.
Defined differently. The new legislation about the files that we could possibly get from KDE made me think about that, and like, how could we know that earlier? Who are the students before they would apply, which is when we normally find out when somebody's first gen. Will we have access to that information earlier so that we could do some more targeted outreach to those students and to their parents?
A good idea. It does take extra. It does some extra guidance and care for sure. Okay, we're going to dig into this. This is great, a great start for us. And you guys blew us away as usual. I have lots of notes. So I'm going to transition us to our last topic of the day to stay on time. And we have some legislative updates. I've asked John Hughes if he will give an update on one of the pieces of legislation that we've seen talk about. And of course, now, John, it's SB 4.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. Okay. Whew. I'm going to let John go first, and then I'll turn it over to the commissioner and to Reagan just to give some relevant updates on things that we as a continuum would be interested in. But this has been talked about. And if you all remember, we did a work group a couple of years ago on the educator workforce. And that work group said, we've got to do something with school leaders. And I know this is near and dear to Jim Flynn's heart too. We've talked about this a lot. And so, John, I know that the chamber's been a big piece of this and in conversation with Senator West. So I'm going to turn it to you to kind of give us an overview and what does that legislation look like and is there movement?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Thank you all for having me on the call again. We're appreciative of the partnership here at the chamber and this collaborative over the past couple of years. And I'm thankful that our CEO, Ashley Watts, has allowed me to be her proxy for this group. And so Senate Bill 4, real quick, obviously it got priority designated this session. It's kind of weird how it came about a little bit. Senator West had heard a little bit about our program and asked that, Beth Davidson from our foundation team come over and testify during committee. And I followed up with him a couple days later and he was like, really appreciate, people from the chamber. He's like, I think I want to implement this statewide. And we were like, oh, sounds great, sir. Yes, sir, Chairman. We'd love to have ongoing conversations about that. And he's really studied this issue over the past couple of years, he being Senator West. And to your point, Amanda has really honed in on the professional development for school principals. And the kind of the way we see it, these are kind of mini CEOs, if you will, for some of your school districts. And, they're educating, they're leading our educators in these classrooms. And so he's really studied the issue And we've had the Leadership for School Institute for School Principals, LISP, since 2011. We've seen about 700 teachers go through that program and have had tons of success. We partner with a group called Truist. They put them through a crash course for professional development. I think the average cost of this program is around 16,000. We do it on we're fortunate enough to go out and seek some dollars to cover tuition and send about 48 school principals through the program. So the idea of Senate Bill 5 is to extend that. We would essentially enter a public-private partnership with the state. Senator West's vision is to have a 5-year program included in the school principal curriculum. And one of those years would be going through the Truist program. So we look to go from 48 to about 150 slots for that portion of it. So we have tons of data to back up. Happy to share that with folks on the call. But the chamber will have a small part in 1 year of educating principals going forward. And we look forward to, the conversations in the House on that bill. I think there's potential that bill will move next week. I was talking with Chairman Lewis. I apologize for being a little tardy on the call, but was speaking with him before this call started. So happy to answer any questions, but that's the program and kind of how we got looped in on Senate Bill 4.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any questions on that? Great. It's great to see it move, John. I really appreciate you sharing that. And hopefully it'll continue to go. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, and Dr. Lawson from Henderson County, Jim probably knows real well, has been a tremendous partner on this. I mean, I think it's about a requirement for principals in his district to go through the program. And as I said a minute ago, the data is there. A lot of these folks that have went through the program have gone on to lead, blue ribbon schools. Not that that's the end all be all. We know there's different circumstances there, but we have a case study, and happy to share that with folks on the call and what the program entails. If anyone has any specific questions,
that would be great. If you don't mind to send that to me, I can share that with the team. I was in your second cohort of that program, and it was probably some of the best professional learning I've ever done as a leader. So
absolutely, I'll send that your way.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Commissioner, I'll just go right in order with K-12, and then Reagan will wrap up with you on post-secondary, if that's okay.
Sure. There's a lot of information here that I'll try to hit through. I was going to mention Senate Bill 4, but our first bill that's one of our highest priority bills is House Bill 257, which deals with the accountability model for us. So if you look at one side, there is the state accountability that meets federal requirements. And the biggest part of that bill that's changing, that seems to have overwhelming support, is the move from the component called change to move to student growth. And where did you get the individual child and where did you take them? So that's a big part of that state accountability piece that meets federal requirements. There were some other proposals that we made through the Kentucky United We Learn Council that didn't make it into it. For example, we actually introduced a bill with every part of the Kentucky United We Learn Council's proposal, if you will. But some of the things got taken out was an adaptive reading and math test, and also the opt-in interim assessments for districts. Another part that's been a change has been chronic absenteeism. One of the pushes from our legislators was to take out the school safety and climate survey and replace that with chronic absenteeism. And the argument there was there's 36 states that have chronic absenteeism as a part of their accountability model. In Kentucky, to have that also. Of course, the counter argument there is absenteeism is already a part of the funding mechanism, so you're hitting districts twice when it comes to chronic absenteeism. Now, the part, and again, there's other parts of that, but I won't go into a lot of detail, just kind of hitting the highlights. But the other part, to me, is the most exciting part, and that's the local accountability piece, which really pulls in all this work we talk about with For example, with local accountability, pulling in our families, pulling in our leaders to say, what exactly do you expect of our schools within your community? We have districts that have set up local accountability systems that look not only at student achievement, not only on student growth, but also things like student well-being. What percentage of our students are engaged in extracurricular activities, and with our goal being 100%, because the more involved students are outside the classroom, the more likely that they're going to be successful once they leave our walls of the schools. Also, providing those vibrant learning opportunities for students who are doing defenses of learning wrapped around the profiles of a learner, also doing project-based learning, things of that nature. So 257 has a big piece for us moving forward as it looks with the accountability model. The principal training, I'll just touch on that. Currently in its form, it is a 5-year plan. So the first 2 years would be training from KDE. The third year would be a gap year, as Senator West has pointed out. Year 4 would be the truest model for the leadership there. And again, as a superintendent that's had principals to attend that, it was a very valuable professional development for my principals as I sent them to it. And then the 5th year would be kind of a menu of options, where if other organizations wanted to have principal trainings, that they could do that. But there would be mentorship throughout the entire 5 years. So KDE would be in charge of making sure that new principals had mentors for that time period. Senate Bill 22, apprenticeship programs for teachers, for high schools that have the apprenticeship for have students that are on an education pathway to help them with dual credit, but also trying to get them into that education pathway a little more quickly. That is sponsored by Senator Higdon. Other things that this group may be interested in, we've talked a little bit about decision-making in Senate Bill 152. It would drastically change what a school-based decision-making council would look like. It would become an advisory council, not a site-based council, not a decision-making council, but an advisory council, and moving a lot of the authority to the principal and also to the local board. Again, I'm not saying we're in favor of any of these. Matter of fact, I'm opposed to Senate Bill 152 personally, but if you look at all these, I'm telling you the programs that are out there. Another one that is of high interest would be Senate Bill 181, which the partner to that would be House Bill 67. And if Senate Bill 181 sounds familiar, it's the same number of the bill last year that talked about traceable communications and what that looked like in a school district. There is a cleanup bill there. There's actually 2. There's one from the Senate side from Senator Titchener, who has pulled in KASS, KASA, Kia, and others to say, okay, what are the things that we missed? So I think both bills are good bills as far as how to do the cleanup there on Senate Bill 181. On the House side, one of the major ones, of course, the House Bill 1. If you look at this is setting up scholarship granting organizations, basically allowing Kentucky to opt in to a national program, whereas let's say someone owes $10,000 in taxes. They can write $1,700 of that to a scholarship granting organization, then that can be put into a private or a public school. It is essentially a voucher type of program. It would be as it moves forward. And right now the thing that I have the biggest questions on is the federal regulations haven't been written on this. So what exactly does this really look like? Right now, by opting in, then we can have then the districts would be able to do scholarship granting organizations or partner with groups to have SGOs and moving forward with that. That is from Representative Kim Poor Moser. There's an anti-grooming bill on House Bill 4. Of course, we're always about trying to make sure we take care of our kids. There's House Bill 253 was the anti-3 queuing bill, which is the science of reading. Representative Tipton is on a part of that. House Bill 389, which is Representative Heveron's dysgraphia bill. We were thankful to be able to work with Representative Heveron on that and make sure that it's in a good spot. So we're very highly in favor of House Bill 389. One that maybe it's not really on a lot of people's list, maybe House Bill 415. And this is really taking the appeals process to EPSB and allowing that to go towards the Attorney General's office. Now, overall, I think that sounds great on the surface, but the only problem that I would have in it is if it gets past the 60 days and there's no resolution, then the case would be dismissed with prejudice. So again, that's not something that EPSB can control. It'd be taken out of their hands and put into another office. And again, we trust that good decisions be made by the Attorney General's office. But if they get out of timeline, and there's 60, it's past that 60 days, and basically that case would be dismissed with prejudice and could not be brought back. So of the 0.0001% of bad actors that we have, that would be something to me would be detrimental too. Something else that may be of interest to this group is House Bill 416, and that's the formative assessment bill that deals with, for example, if an EPP is looking at a test that gets you into a teacher ed program, that it would be used as a formative assessment to determine what interventions that maybe a student would need to help them through the program. The last one that I'll mention is House Bill 562, which is an alternate diploma bill. And basically what this is, it takes your upper level, maybe your FMD students that are upper level, and gives them a meaningful diploma that we're looking at industries that would recognize this diploma to make sure students are employable. It would also increase graduation rates for schools as a side effect. But this is something I think that has a tremendous potential as far as helping our students with maybe with a little more needs, but giving them a true diploma. Because currently, if you're an FMD student and you're on an alternate route, you get a certificate of completion, which is essentially, it's almost like you're treated as a dropout. And so you don't have a diploma that gets you into being employed. So that's something else that we're very excited about. House Bill 500, I'll close with that. I've talked a little bit about that. When you look at, we are thankful that the equalized facility funding was included there for districts. You may hear a lot about that. We're thankful that the governor's language for the health insurance has been added into the House Bill 500. But again, SEEK has been increased by $40 per student, 166 in the second year. Of course, we feel like to keep up with inflation, we'd like to see that at a higher rate. But then the big ask that we've been working on is fully funding transportation, which would be another $93 million approximately. Right now, funding transportation at 83% or 81%. I'm sorry. That's a lot, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the commissioner? Just a few things going on. Thank you, sir.
Jim, is there anything maybe I missed that maybe KASS would be interested in that throwing in there?
No, you did a good job. Our big thing is we're laser focused on the funding issue, and particularly those recurring revenue streams through seat-based, seek allotment, transportation, and we've talked with them about considering tier one, maybe moving from 17.5% to 20% to kind of narrow that gap between the haves and have-nots, if you will. And so those three big recurring revenue streams are where we can invest in instruction and in the education workforce competitiveness that we still need to make some progress.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner, we did have a question in the chat. It says, what was the number for the anti-grooming bill?
There is one that is, there's two or three, but the one that was on our radar, let me find that number again. I think it was, oh goodness, let me find my notes here. I'll put it in the chat as soon as I find it.
Thank you.
House Bill 4, House Bill 4, Representative Proctor.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Reagan, you want to do an overview of some legislation?
Sure, I'll be glad to wrap us up with some higher ed legislation, and I'll try to move quickly considering what time it is. I'll start with good news. Today is day 43 of a 60-day session, so we are slowly fastly, some days, chipping away at the last third of the session. I'll actually start with House Bill 500 as we still have a lot of ways to go with that bill. Dr. Thompson mentioned briefly when he introduced us or he got us going, that right now it doesn't look good for higher ed. We're looking at reductions across the board. So I'll go into a little bit more detail of what we're looking at as far as CPE agency budget, our institutions, our universities, as well as KCTCS. So as many of you all know, CPE submits a combined budget request to the legislature for our agency budget, as well as our public universities and for KCTCS. They've treated us consistently pretty equal in what we're seeing in the current version of House Bill 500. which is a reduction of 4% in year one and a reduction of 7% in year two. So that is huge for our institutions. It totals 42 million of a cut in the first year and 73 million of a cut in year two. Those same reductions are applied to CPE's agency budget in our general fund, which, CPE is a small agency. Our total agency operations are only about 7.9 million. So when you cut that by 4 and then 7%, it's significant. And so if that is what's kept in House Bill 500, we'll have to make some tough decisions at the agency level. Another thing that the budget shows is no requested increases in any of the categories that our institutions had been advocating for over the interim. The current performance fund allocation at the current biennium is 115 million, and House Bill 500 leaves it at that 115 million. They had initially requested an increase of 30 million in year one and 45 million in year two. It also does not provide any funding for new capital construction projects like several last versions of the budget bills have over the course of our budget sessions, which have been crucial for our institutions to modernize their campuses and bring them up to where they should be. We've had really good conversations down there over the last couple of weeks, especially with Senate leadership, about the return on investment in higher ed. Luckily, it's easy for us to advocate for funding higher ed and increasing investments to higher ed because of what we've been able to do with prior investments. Dr. Thompson always likes to brag on higher ed, and I see no reason not to do it as well because we're showing that the investment is truly working. Kentucky is less than 5 percentage points away from our goal of having 60% of working adults with a degree or credential by 2030. That is very important to get us where we need to be to produce graduates in our workforce. Degrees and credentials, so we count anything beyond high school as post-secondary education, and those degrees and credentials have increased by 15% in the last 5 years. A big bragging point is our healthcare program enrollment in Kentucky is up. Our healthcare pathways enrollment is up 23% since the establishment of the Healthcare Workforce Collaborative Investment Fund. That has proved that legislative investment in post-secondary is bringing about results, and we would really like to model that and scale that to other sectors that Kentucky needs. 6 in 10 Kentucky public college students are debt-free when they graduate. So not only are more students entering post-secondary education, more of them are graduating debt-free. So we feel like our advocacy is landing well. We are very positive. We're very optimistic about seeing improvement in House Bill 500. The question remains whether we'll see that in a new Senate version of the bill or whether we'll have to wait to conference committee to see what comes out of House Bill 500. As far as policy stuff, if you've been paying attention to the higher ed space this session, you likely have noticed that the House has paid a lot more attention to higher ed than the Senate has. The House has sent over several higher ed related bills to the Senate, and the Senate has yet to send anything over to the House that would be considered higher ed. One of those, the very first one being sent to the Senate from the House, was House Bill 96. This is related to the Post-Secondary Education Performance Funding Working Group. So who gets in a room and makes decisions about what the funding model will look like for that 115 million that is allocated to our public institutions. Currently, there are only 2 members of that work group from the General Assembly. House Bill 96 would increase the membership to a total of 10 members from the General Assembly, 4 majority reps from the House and the Senate, and 1 minority rep from each chamber. It would also change the CPE president to being a non-voting chair of that committee and still facilitate those meetings. So like I said, there's still 115 million in that pool. We're hopeful to see some inflationary increases. Another thing that it does that we think is critically important is it changes the meeting cadence to a calendar year rather than a fiscal year. So, and it has an emergency clause. So if that bill passes, they will be able to go ahead and immediately get to work rather than waiting for a new fiscal year. Another one that we are watching, and I'm really just mentioning stuff that we feel like has some good life left in it as of right now, is House Bill 307, an act related to post-secondary proactive admissions. Our institutions are very excited about the possibility of getting this program implemented in Kentucky, similar to Georgia Match and Tennessee Promise and innovative admissions programs that you may have heard about in other states. The committee sub actually named House Bill 307 as the My Kentucky Future Act. Another plug for Futurity, when you Google My Kentucky Future Act, Futurity is the first thing that pops up, and then the next couple of things are articles about Futurity. So we were really excited when we saw that kind of coincidence. In this program, students would opt in to the My Kentucky Future Act program, where they would then be agreeing to send data to the institutions on their GPAs and their test scores, and if they've been involved in any of the Governor's School for the Arts programs. Once the institutions receive that data, they would then be required to reach out to individual students that met the admissions criteria for their specific institution. So students would receive a letter from all of the public institutions where they met the admissions criteria. And then required on the letter would be information about how to access Futurity, where they would have all of Kia's resources, a link to the common application where they would submit their application to each institution they were eligible to through that common application, and really just access to the one-stop shop that Futurity is. We are really pleased about what this has the ability to do, and I see Commissioner has put a comment in the chat. There may be some final details that will get worked out in the Senate. But overall, for a student that has not grown up in a college-going family or a college-going culture, to receive a letter from multiple institutions that say you have the aptitude to come to our university, we think it could be very powerful for those students, and it has proven successful in many other states. Another one we are looking at closely is House Bill 497. This is the tuition waiver bill sponsored by James Tipton. This passed the House, fairly narrow margins. There's been a lot of debate about this bill. Essentially, what it does is create or mandate that all of our currently unfunded required state tuition waiver programs be turned into last dollar scholarships, with the exception of the waiver for the foster and adoptive student population. It does not make any changes to that one. So that students who are in the recipient categories of those waivers would first be required to fill out the FAFSA, and then any aid that the student was eligible for would be applied to their tuition, and then the universities would waive the remaining balance instead of their full tuition. So we estimate that would cut the cost of lost revenue for our institutions in half. Currently, it is costing our institutions about $30 million in lost revenue. And so our estimates show that by having those students complete the FAFSA, it would tack that down to possibly $15 million. Senate Bill 1 of 2024 prompted what is now Senate Bill 6, sponsored by Senator Stivers. This is an appropriation of $150 million to the Endowed Research Fund. This is a consortium managed by the CPE that would fund support for collaborative research at our institutions, and that research would be identified through an application process. So we are really excited to see an appropriation follow Senate Bill 1 that passed in 2024. Last thing I need to mention with my 3 minutes is House Bill 619. This is the KCTCS reform bill. This bill was heard in the House Appropriations and Revenue Committee at noon today, and it has passed through A&R. What 619 did is, or currently does, is apply the improvement recommendations for the Kentucky Community and Technical College system that arose out of SJR 197 from 2024. I have not yet looked at the committee substitute since it just was made public while I was on this meeting, but look forward to seeing what that does, and know that Dr. Quarles and his team have worked diligently for a couple of sessions now on getting their reform bill passed. So we are supportive in those efforts and look forward to see the final product. So that was a quick rundown. If you all have any questions about higher ed, I'm happy to answer those.
Great. Thank you, Reagan, so much. And thank everybody for your conversation today. This is just the beginning, and I think you've given us some great insight. If you have any other partnerships, ideas, challenges, please let us know. And we really appreciate the speakers today to share their information. I will follow up with an email with a PowerPoint. I already had a few people text me and ask if we would be sharing that, and we will. And so we look forward to seeing you. Actually, we have another meeting in April, and so I'll be sending out an agenda to that in the near future. Have a great afternoon, and note that there is 2 minutes to spare. You are welcome. Have a good one.